Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies, and the Philadelphia Phillies have named an opening day starter. I'll give you one guess who it is.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio doing sports talk here in Philadelphia for 97.5 The Fanatic. Did I say 97.5 The Fanatic already? Whatever. And I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 years. This is my fourth season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube channel, Locked On Phillies on YouTube. It'll get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It really helps us out. It's free and easy. So if you haven't done that, please do that. That would be very helpful to us here on Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Not your first month. No, your first year with Monarch Money. Now, the Phillies have made one of the least surprising announcements that they will make all season long. They have named an opening day starter. And if you're watching on YouTube and you can see our graphic on the side, you can already see it says Wheeler named opening day starter. Of course, it's Zack Wheeler, right? This is kind of an anticlimactic decision by the Philadelphia Phillies because it was always going to be Wheels. Now, this gives us an opportunity, though, to talk about how Wheeler stacks up against some of the great arms in baseball, right? Like having Zack Wheeler as your opening day starter being a no-brainer kind of tells you, one, how good he is, and two, reminds you how good this rotation is, right? Well, I guess it's vice versa. Rotation first, Wheeler second. Think about the guys that are in this rotation. I've talked about them ad nauseum in spring training because, frankly, it's been a drama-free spring training. There hasn't really been much to focus on as far as that's concerned. Like the big news has been Weston Wilson's injury and Matt Strahm's injury. And we got some good news on Matt Strahm. So we'll see if he's ready for opening day. We're not sure yet, but it doesn't seem to be anything major as far as anything's concerned. It's going to linger through the season, at least at this point. So that's good. They may still try and be cautious with him. But on the Zack Wheeler point, right? Here's what it says about him. The rotation's unbelievable. Aaron Nola was the opening day starter for a long stretch for this team. In fact, he may still hold the Phillies' record for consecutive opening day starts. He has been a mainstay of this rotation for years, homegrown. Aaron Nola does not get enough credit. He is one of the more underrated athletes in the city of Philadelphia right now. And Zack Wheeler took over for him in recent years. Now, look further, and you see a guy in Ranger Suarez who is arguably when he's at his best. Like you could argue that Ranger Suarez has the maybe best peak stuff in this rotation. I don't know. He's close to Zack Wheeler and Aaron Nola and another guy, Christopher Sanchez, who we're going to talk about. Now, the problem with Ranger Suarez has been durability. That's no question. But when he's on, he is as dominant as any other guy in this rotation. He's just not as on as often. So I understand it not being Ranger Suarez. Like I get it. But he's very talented. The guy, Christopher Sanchez, who we just brought up, he has been the talk of the Grapefruit League down there in Florida. Like, he has been unbelievably talked about in Philadelphia Phillies spring training. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk about who the best or the second best starter is. So the best starter outside of Zack Wheeler for the Philadelphia Phillies. And you can make a case for three guys. So we're going to run through that a little bit more. And then we got our Mailbag Monday questions in the final segment. But the fact that you've got a rotation of Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez, and Jesus Luzardo, who honestly may be an opening day starter for a couple teams in baseball. I don't know. That may be a stretch, but you look at some of the direct teams pitching wise, and maybe he would be the guy that they'd give the ball to first. That may be, again, reaching a little bit, but he's a really solid pitcher for where he's at in the rotation. That's why it's so impressive that Zack Wheeler is the opening day starter, because in a rotation of really great pitchers, he was the easy choice. He is head and shoulders above everybody else in this rotation when it comes to the guy that he has been for the Philadelphia Phillies. Like normally when you see a stacked rotation, you probably look at it and you say, okay, well, who do we throw? Do we throw Wheeler? Do we throw Nola? Do we throw Sanchez? Do we throw Suarez? We could throw any of these guys and feel pretty good about our chances to win on opening day. Who deserves it? Well, a lot of these guys, 3 of the 4 were in the minors with the Philadelphia Phillies, and Zack Wheeler being the one that was not, but you still look at that and you say, okay, been with the team for a while, some homegrown with Aaron Nola. Like it should have been a tougher decision than what it was in actuality. And that is just further credit to Zack Wheeler for being as dominant as he has been these past couple years, or really since signing here in Philadelphia. Like it kind of reminds me of the 4 aces year back in 2011, where you had Halladay, Hamels, Lee, Oswalt, and then of course you had Joe Blanton rounding stuff out. That's kind of what the Philadelphia Phillies are looking at with Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Suarez, and then Jesus Luzardo rounding things out. Now, I think Luzardo's better than Joe Blanton was that year, but the point is there wasn't really a question on who was going to be the opening day starter in 2011 because it was going to be Roy Halladay. But you look at those other guys, and Lee and Oswalt and Hamels are fringe Hall of Fame players, even though Roy Halladay is in the Hall of Fame. And you say, okay, well, that should be a tough decision with all of those guys, and it really wasn't. And Halladay was unbelievable that year. So it's a credit to the guy who makes the hard decision easy, that he's that much above the talent level of those other guys. And I just look around baseball. I mean, the only other team in baseball that's having like this problem to this level, not that it's a problem, but like this type of conversation would be warranted, would be the Los Angeles Dodgers. And you look at the Dodgers and you say, well, no one's really making it easy for them. They have great pitchers. They have a lot of great arms, but there is no above and beyond guy that's 1-1 for the Dodgers. They have a bunch of interchangeable great arms, and that's what it should be when you have rotations like this. But that just shows you the level that Zack Wheeler is on. For example, like you look at the Braves, and it's just like, okay, you have 3 guys at the top in Sale and Strider and Schwellenbach, but Strider's coming off an injury. Schwellenbach's young. Chris Sale just won Cy Young. Obviously, it's going to be Chris Sale. It shouldn't be too tough of a decision for them to pick. And that's just a clean example of how other teams' decisions are being made on opening day starter. And I look at that and I say, it's just further impressive that Rob Thompson had no questions about Zack Wheeler being the guy. And by the way, if anyone's worried at all about the competitive nature of rotations and this whole idea that a lot of guys that are the guy want to be the guy, if that doesn't make sense, let me explain. When you get a room full of very talented dudes, if the chemistry isn't right, it could be a negative thing to have so many talented players because everyone wants their piece of the pie. The Phillies are handling it well, it sounds like. Aaron Nola talked today to reporters and was talking about how Zack Wheeler is the best in the game. He's the best pitcher on the planet. He should absolutely get the ball. I imagine that sentiment is echoed by other Philadelphia Phillies hurlers that had the opportunity to potentially start on opening day. Like, that's the thing. And that's, again, more credit. The players see it, the manager sees it, the fans see it, the organization sees it, the rest of the league sees it. Zack Wheeler is the opening day starter for the Philadelphia Phillies, locked down. And one thing that I do or have done in past couple seasons when Zack Wheeler has been named opening day starter, breaking Aaron Nola's streak, I do want to continue to give credit to Aaron Nola for putting that streak together because this dude is still a very, very talented pitcher. I'm going to make a strong case for him as the second best starter when we get into our next segment, even though Christopher Sanchez is the hot name and Ranger Suarez is heading into a contract year. With Zack Wheeler being named opening day starter again, it's just a reminder, right? We're probably never going to see a stretch that Aaron Nola went on for the Philadelphia Phillies again. Or we may not for a long time. Who knows where baseball goes as far as how long pitchers throw for, how long they remain with certain teams for. We know that pitchers' careers can be shortened these days with the uptick in velocity. Guys are more careful with pitchers. Guys are more wary to pay pitchers long-term deals. So it's just a reminder, like Wheeler's been the opening day starter for what, 2 seasons, right? 3 or no, I think it's 2 seasons the past 2 years it's been Zack Wheeler. And Nola did it for, I think, 7 or 8. Like, it's just, you're not going to see that stretch for a long time for the Philadelphia Phillies. Zack Wheeler's darn good. And guess what? The next 3 or 4 years, could it be Andrew Painter? Could it be Christopher Sanchez? Absolutely. We're already thinking about who the next best guy is that maybe in a couple years, if Zack Wheeler takes a step back, would be the opening day starter. So credit to Aaron Nola for how long he's done it and always being gracious with the opening day starter decision, even though he was a guy that probably wanted to see his streak continue. And listen, he's a viable option to be a number one starter. I talked about how Luzardo, maybe for like one team in baseball, the Chicago White Sox, you might look at him as like an opening day guy. But Aaron Nola would probably be an opening day starter on 7, 8 teams in baseball, if not more. He's still that good, and he's comfortable to take a backseat to Zack Wheeler. So a lot of good things about this decision. It's a very easy decision, but my point in having this conversation is it not necessarily is an easy decision when you look at other teams around baseball or you imagine the possibilities with chemistry and management and ownership and everything like that. The Philadelphia Phillies handle their business properly. They make the right call. They set up their rotation the right way. They are handling things just the way they should. And for all the Phillies' faults, they operate very, very well in decisions like these. The easy stuff, they never mess up, right? We take that for granted sometimes because there's a lot of teams that do. So if you're going to be in Washington on the 27th of March, which is just 10 days away now, happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody out there, by the way. Yes, there is a little green in this hat, even if you can't see it from the lighting here. So that counts. Nobody pinch me. You're going to see Zack Wheeler on opening day take the mound. By the way, the Nationals are going with Mackenzie Gore as their opening day starter. So we have the matchup for the Philadelphia Phillies. Phillies are going to see a lot of lefties this year. That's something that absolutely is going to happen. Guys are going to line up their lefties in their rotation to face the Philadelphia Phillies because of their weakness against that. So get used to that as we have the past couple years. Get used to seeing Zack Wheeler on the mound in big-time moments. He's earned it. He's fully deserved it. He's going to continue to get that honor as his time here in Philadelphia progresses, especially with the new contract extension. Coming up next, who's the second best starter? Because we talked about 3 guys that could be in that conversation with Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, and Christopher Sanchez. We know Wheeler's won one, right? A lot of buzz about Sanchez. Nola has the tenure. Suarez has the contract year and maybe the highest ceiling of those 3 guys. I said maybe the highest ceiling of anybody on the team. His stuff is that good. I mean it. Who's number 2? We will talk about it coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Wonderful Pistachios first, because if you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you should crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feeling fuller longer. I mean, I love the no shells variety. I still got this bag sitting right here to be able to show you if you're watching on YouTube. The sea salt and vinegar, the flavoring is awesome. I don't have to crack the shells. I can just open the Ziploc bag, John, and pour it right into my mouth. And that way I can get that snack on the go. I don't have to go through the trouble of cracking them. Of course, they make the regular ones that you can crack open the shells if you want the full immersive pistachio experience. But for me, I'm a speed eater, so I like it that way. They got a lot of different flavors and seasonings, and they've got the shells or the no shells. They got everything you could want in a great snack. And if you're trying to get in shape for the summer, a great healthy snack like this is the way to go. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Trust me, they're one of the best snacks you can get if you're getting ready for summer or really any time of the year. Check out Wonderful Pistachios. I also want to tell you about our friends over at Monarch Money, because it happens to all of us, right? You check your bank account and you wonder, where in the world did all my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, you're going to be in a situation where it's easy to lose track. And that's why you need help. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, it gives you full visibility and control over your finances to help you out with everything you need. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. No, it's much more than that. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. The all inconvenience is one of the best things for me, right? Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Like say you've got a vacation coming up. I got a big one this summer that I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to pay for. Monarch Money can help me with that. You can say, okay, here's what you need to save. Here's where you're spending too much on. Help you run down that. It's the best, Monarch Money. It'll help you take control of your finances with the Monarch Money app. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com. So you can go to the website for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Go ahead and check out our friends at Monarch Money. Let's have this fun little conversation, okay? Before we get into our Mailbag Monday questions in our final segment, I want to talk about who the second best starter on the Philadelphia Phillies is. There are options. There are 3 of them. If anyone's going to make the argument that Jesus Luzardo is the second best starter on the Philadelphia Phillies, my response to that would be he's talented. He's not there yet. We'll see. He had some injury issues in Miami last year. He just got to the team. We haven't even seen him pitch in the regular season in the Phillies uniform. Too early to make that call. He's a good pitcher. He's going to be a big part of this rotation this year to round things out on the back end and balance out the staff. But he's not in the conversation yet for second best pitcher on this team. Who is Christopher Sanchez, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez. Those are our 3 candidates. So let's break down the argument for each of them to try and find out who the second best is. By the way, a little disclaimer here. Second best pitcher does not mean they are the day 2 starter. When the Philadelphia Phillies take the field for their second game of the year in Washington, which I believe will be Saturday like it always is because they give the weird Friday off for the potential rain delays for opening day, which I don't get. But anyway, it may mean that this guy's the 3rd starter or the 4th starter. The Phillies have mentioned, they haven't announced yet, but they've mentioned that they could look to break up the handedness of their pitchers. So you have Zack Wheeler as a righty. Maybe, let's say we determine that Aaron Nola is the second best pitcher. Well, they might go Christopher Sanchez or Ranger Suarez as the number 2 arm in the rotation to go righty, lefty, then Nola as a righty, then Suarez as a lefty, and then round things out with Luzardo. That could be what they do. So we'll see. It's not a guarantee if they're the number 2 pitcher that they should start the second day. And frankly, to go back to that Zack Wheeler conversation, opening day starter is just one of those like title things that guys like to get, but it doesn't really matter all that much. You want to win opening day, obviously, but there's 161 more baseball games after that day. Man, that number just feels higher every year. And the rotations get all jumbled up when you have off days and you play different teams and guys have played different amounts of games and everything. So it's not as big of a deal as it may seem at face value. But let's make the cases for the second best pitcher on the Philadelphia Phillies roster, starting with the guy that has held down that spot for the past couple years, I think. And that's Aaron Nola. Nola has the tenure, right? He has been here forever. He has the reliability. It's death, taxes, and Aaron Nola when it comes to Philadelphia Phillies pitching. Now, I'm talking about availability, not necessarily performance. It's funny how his performance and his availability have been conversely related, or not maybe conversely related, but have conflicting principles. When you think about Aaron Nola as a guy that can go out there and give you 30 starts a year, you say, bet your damn house on it. Like he's going to do it every single year. When you talk about who's Aaron Nola going to be on a given day, it's a bigger coin flip than anybody else in the rotation. So the performance is variable. The reliability is key. And when he's on, he's on. Like he has finished outside of Zack Wheeler, because he finished, 3rd in 2018 in the Cy Young voting? He was either 3rd or runner-up. I want to say it was 3rd. That is the second highest finish, obviously, in Cy Young voting of anybody on this roster. Zack Wheeler finished 2nd this past year, so he just jumped that. But Zack Wheeler's been good for a while, and it still took him till last year to take a spot better than what Aaron Nola got in 2018. Now, I know what you're saying, 2018, 7 years ago. He's not that same guy anymore. It needs a different arm. And I get that. But my point is, this is a guy that is still a high level pitcher. I don't think his ceiling, as far as his stuff, is where Christopher Sanchez and Ranger Suarez is. But if you're talking about second best pitcher, that can mean a lot of different things, including who you trust most to be out there when it matters most and who you trust to be out there available all season. Aaron Nola is exactly what Ranger Suarez has not been for the Philadelphia Phillies. He is out there every single time his number is called, and Ranger Suarez has been injured and unavailable and sometimes out of shape and sometimes visa issues, and some of those not his fault, some of those are his fault, but it depends on what you value. So that's the case for Aaron Nola, the wily vet that has been around forever and has somehow just been as reliable as they come. Now let's go to Ranger Suarez, who we were talking about there. Ranger Suarez is the wild card, of these three is how I'm going to label him. He can be absolutely unbelievable for a long stretch too. Like last year was not an anomaly. It was not a fluke. No, Ranger Suarez had one of like the best heat check type of things for the Philadelphia Phillies. Is how I want to call it. He's like Klay Thompson, right? There'll be games where Klay Thompson for the Golden State Warriors and now the Dallas Mavericks, but we'll talk about his Warriors tenure, would go out there and not be as productive as a guy like Steph Curry. But when that dude's on, that dude's on. And like he'll hit a hot stretch and there will just be like maybe a month of basketball where he's the best three-point shooter on his team and on the planet. Ranger Suarez will have hot stretches where for like a month and change, he is one of the best pitchers on the planet and arguably the best pitcher on his team. But for every month that he has where he's unbelievable, there's normally a month later on in the season where he's unavailable or something falls apart. He's got dead arm. His velocity drops. He can't find it. And credit to Ranger Suarez, something that he has that really you could say about all of these guys, Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, and Suarez, and we'll see about Luzardo. The big moments are never too big. Like you put Ranger Suarez out there on the mound in the postseason, I feel damn good about his chances to get the job done. But you know what? Aaron Nola has proven that. Zack Wheeler has proven that to the nth degree. And Christopher Sanchez proved that last year in his first true playoff action against the New York Mets in that divisional series. So Ranger Suarez is kind of like you're buying the upside. When he's at his best, his stuff rivals anybody in baseball, but you don't know how long he's going to be at his best for. Contract year makes that interesting because we see players a lot of time, contract year, be more incentivized to be in better shape or to take care of your body differently because there's a lot of money on the line. Is that the way it should be? In an ideal world, you hope guys take care of themselves all the time. But in a realistic world, that matters. And then we'll get to the final guy, Christopher Sanchez, the up-and-comer, the heir apparent. He is the guy in the Philadelphia Phillies rotation right now that looks like the future stud, right? There have been talks about him potentially being a co-ace with Zack Wheeler. And my response to that would be, I thought that was Aaron Nola's role. So Christopher Sanchez has now jumped Aaron Nola, maybe based on what he's done in spring training and what he did last year. The extra velocity, the changeup. I mean, he has the best pitch in the Philadelphia Phillies rotation. Christopher Sanchez's changeup is the best pitch that any Philadelphia Phillies starter throws. The only guy on the roster that rivals that is Jose Alvarado's like 102-mile-an-hour sinker. And other than that, I mean, those are the two like standout pitches. Zack Wheeler has his fastball and Aaron Nola has his two-seam and everyone's got a great pitch. Like I'm not saying the other guys stink in comparison, but Christopher Sanchez has the best 1-2 punch of anybody on this rotation and maybe anybody in baseball, you could argue. You could see how it plays out this year, but do you bet on the upside of a young player taking a huge, huge step in the right direction? So there's upsides and downsides to all of these guys. If you ever played Pokemon, right, and you're like, Connor, where are you going with this? But everyone's played Pokemon, right? You know how it goes. You get like 3 starter Pokemon. They all have their upsides, downsides, and middle grounds where it's Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander. Almost forgot for a second. That's kind of what these 3 guys are. They all have their upsides. They all have their downsides. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. They're all different in a way. My pick, the second best pitcher in the Philadelphia Phillies rotation this year, I'm going to go with Aaron Nola still. I like betting on the tried and true, and that's just me, right? Christopher Sanchez, I hope he has the insane year that everybody's talking about. Seems like another big step after one big step, and sometimes regression happens. Ranger Suarez, contract year, big opportunity for him, but the availability scares me. And we're talking about a high bar. These guys are great pitchers. I like each and every one of them being on. I love each and every one of them being on this team. But I'm going to go with Aaron Nola because I know he's going to be available. And I know when he's at his best, he's one of the better pitchers in baseball in like that top tier. So Nola's my pick. Let me know in the comments who you think the second best pitcher in this rotation is. And coming up, speaking of letting me know things, we have our Mailbag Monday questions that I'm going to run through. We got a question about Bryce Harper and a question about Max Kepler. And both questions are very similar. So we'll talk about that coming up as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, so we have some Mailbag Monday questions that people put in on Twitter that we always do on Monday, sometimes on Tuesday if I'm getting back from vacation or anything like that. But we've got this all taken care of for you today. We've got some great questions. So I'm going to start with this one. This is from Timothy, I think is how it is because it's got the dashes in it, like the Key and Peele stretch, but we'll just call him Tim. Tim on Twitter responds to the Mailbag Monday opportunity and says, is Bryce going to have an MVP type blowout season with over 35 home runs? Now, over 35 home runs is going to be tough. I think he's going to be right around there. He was either at 30 or a little bit above 30 this past year. I think he might have been at 31. I'll have to do a look back on that one. But as far as over 35 home runs, it's going to be tough. If he does, the Phillies are absolutely unbelievable. And you know what, Tim, I'm inclined to say yes, actually, because I go back to my argument about the Tommy John recovery, right? You think about pitchers. When pitchers have Tommy John surgery, look at a guy like Andrew Painter. He has the surgery. He takes a year off. Then he does a year back of kind of rehab-ish type of stuff. And then he really gets back to being able to throw the next year, and he still hasn't thrown competitively for the Phillies. He threw competitively in the Arizona Fall League, so he's been able to, but the Phillies are keeping it lightly because normally it's a 2-year recovery, and the third year out from surgery is when you see pitchers get back to themselves. I'd imagine that applies just body-wise to hitters too, even though they can play through it. I think you start feeling right when you get to that third year, and this is Bryce Harper's 3rd year of recovering from Tommy John surgery. So is he feeling better this year? Is he feeling healthier this year? He's had the elbow issues in the past that have kind of nagged him. Are those side effects of recovering from the surgery and coming back so quickly? Is it a breakdown of his body as he gets older because he swings so violently? I'm not sure. You're kind of more betting not so much on Bryce Harper's performance, but Bryce Harper's health. He seems like he's feeling good. He's been drinking those lattes. I don't know how I feel about the raw milk, but if you haven't seen his TikTok videos of him being an influencer this offseason and all the stuff he's doing to take care of his body, I guess. I'm betting on Bryce Harper being healthy this year. I'm betting on the third year out of Tommy John surgery being the one where he feels back to himself almost fully or maybe totally fully, and that could lead to a power increase. So is Bryce Harper going to have one of those years? You know what? I do get that vibe that Bryce Harper is in for one of those special seasons. It feels like, you know how earthquakes work? You may not if you're in the Northeast. And I'm not I've lived up here my whole life, but I know a little bit about it from talking to people who lived on the West Coast and stuff like that, or at least maybe this is just my perception of what earthquakes are like. You might be like, why in the world is this dude talking about earthquakes? We got Pokemon, we got earthquakes, we got all kinds of stuff. And bear with me. I always bring it back around. I promise. You haven't had an earthquake for 5 years and you expect that to happen in California or something like that, or 10 years or however often it happens, you start to get antsy. You're kind of yeah, we're due for one. Kind of like a snowstorm in the winter for the Northeast. It's yeah, it's been cold, but we've only had a little bit of snow. You know we're going to get crushed by something. Every day that goes by that you don't have snow, you almost feel like it's more likely that you have snow one of these days. It's just one of those things where you feel like you're due. I feel like we're due for one of the great Bryce Harper seasons. That's just the gut feeling that I get, and the recovery from Tommy John surgery and the change in the lineup position are two data points that I'm going to use to kind of make my gut feeling have a little bit more concreteness to it. But I'm going off vibes mainly, and my feeling is that Bryce Harper is in for a big year. Take that for what you will. Use those points of actual realistic thinking to try and back that up. But if he does, it will be huge for the Philadelphia Phillies. And we have another question on the output of a player this season. This comes from Sean Fitzpatrick on Twitter. If healthy, give me your prediction on season stats for Max Kepler. Could be an under the radar shrewd signing by Dave Dombrowski. I agree. I think Max Kepler has some upside. I think people are looking at Juan Soto and the move the Mets made, and then they see Max Kepler and they're like, well, this guy's not Juan Soto. This guy's not even close to Juan Soto. He's not an all-star, all-MLB guy. And I say, well, give Max Kepler a chance. He may surprise you if your bar is set the right way. Now, here's what Max Kepler did last year in an injury-laden 2024 season. He batted .253 in 368 at-bats, only had 8 home runs. Over a career, his per 162 averages, .237. You're looking at home runs per 162, hang on. And now I've got a Dan McDonald's ad on my baseball reference thing. But you're looking at a situation where he can show off a little bit of home run pop. He's averaging 24 per 162 games in his career. Like 31 doubles, 2 triples, obviously not a speed guy. He's averaging 642 plate appearances over 162 game average. So my prediction for Max Kepler with the Phillies is a spot where he's going to have more protection than he's ever had. I think he's he's not going to play all 162. So I'm going to put him as a 20-plus home run guy, somewhere in the low 20s. Like, let's call it 22. I think he's going to bat around 240 to 245. I think strikeouts are going to be a bit of a problem. He's probably going to be right around 100 strikeouts on the year. But I think he's going to be productive. And if you get 20 home runs from him, and then you're getting like 20 from Trey Turner or maybe more, you're getting like 15 from Alec Boehm, 15 from JT Realmuto, 40 from Schwarber, 35 from Harper. Like, this team's got guys that can hit the ball out of the yard. Castellanos is going to give you 20. Like, you're going to be in a great spot when it comes to the ability to hit the long ball, like the Phillies always are. But if he bats 245, that's also pretty darn good compared to what his career average is, which you'll take from a guy that you're looking at as just a home run hitter. So Max Kepler, big upside, bottom basement if he ends up being either injured or not productive like we've seen in some of his recent seasons with the Minnesota Twins. So we'll see. Thank you for the Mailbag Monday questions. I appreciate it. And that's all for today's episode. So thank you for joining us on today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Once again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, hitting that subscribe button on the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out on Locked On Phillies here. And it'll help you stay up to date on everything. And I will talk to you tomorrow on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.